Welcome back to the deep dive. We are doing something a little different today. Usually when we look at a business failure, it's a story about bad timing or, a product that didn't quite click or maybe a CEO who fell asleep at the wheel. But today we are looking at the grandfather of them all, the ghost that really haunts every single boardroom in America.
It really is. It's like the patient zero of modern corporate trauma.
We are talking about Enron. And I know what you're thinking. I know the Enron story. Smartest guys in the room, cooking the books, jail time. But looking through this stack of research you've pulled together, I mean, the scale of the delusion is just staggering. It wasn't just a scam. It was a cultural phenomenon.
That is exactly the right way to frame it. You have to remember, for 6 years running, Fortune magazine named Enron America's most innovative company. Gruel. They weren't seen as criminals in the 90s, not at all. They were like the Beatles of capitalism. They were trading water, they were trading weather, they were going to stream movies before Netflix was even mailing DVDs. They were the future.
And now, the name just means fraud. Plain and simple. But here's the weirdest part of the file you sent me, and it's the reason we are actually pulling this out of the archives right now. Enron is back.
Yeah, we have to talk about that. It is the strangest coda to a corporate tragedy I think I have ever seen.
I'm looking at this timeline in the source material. Late 2024, early 2025, there's an Enron reboot, a micronuclear reactor, a crypto token. What is happening?
It's essentially performance art meets late-stage capitalism. But the fact that it went viral, the fact that people, engaged with it, that tells you everything about how powerful the Enron brand still is. It's become this symbol for the ultimate grift.
We are definitely going to get to the Enron egg and the whole satire thing later in the show, but our mission today is to understand how we got there. We need to go from the humble pipelines in Omaha all the way to the prison cells in Texas. I really want to understand the mechanics of the illusion. How do you hide that much debt? How do you convince the world you're profitable when you're just bleeding cash?
It's a mix of incredibly complex accounting and, incredibly simple human arrogance. And it all starts with a culture clash.
Right. Let's start at the beginning. Section 1 in our outline, the merger and the intestine mistake, which, honestly, that sounds like a band name.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But to understand Enron, you have to understand the two parents that made it. Picture the landscape in the mid-'80s. On one side, you have North. They're based in Omaha, Nebraska. Think Warren Buffett country.
Okay, so very conservative, Midwestern.
Extremely. They're a Depression-era success story. They run this massive natural gas pipeline network, and they run it like a utility. Low risk, steady returns. These are the guys who wear cardigans. They drink coffee at 8 a.m., they go home at 5 p.m.
Got it. Parent A. Safe, boring, reliable.
Then you have Houston Natural Gas, HNG. This is the aggressive Texas counterpart. They are run by a guy named Kenneth Lay. They are ambitious, they're leveraging up, and they are fighting for territory in a very, very volatile market. These guys wear cowboy boots and eat steak dinners and talk about conquering the world.
So you have oil and water, or, I guess, gas and gas.
Gas and gas, but with very different pressures. So in May 1985, North, the Safe Omaha company, acquires HNG for $2.3 billion.
Yeah.
On paper, this makes total sense. North had the north-south pipelines. HNG had the east-west pipelines. Put them together, and you have the second largest gas pipeline system in the entire United States. It creates a national grid.
So it sounds like it should have been a boring, reliable, cash-printing utility business, a monopoly almost.
It absolutely should have been. But the culture clash was immediate. The Omaha people and the Houston people, they just hated each other.
Yeah.
And even though North was the one buying HNG, Kenneth Lay, the guy from the smaller acquired company, he manages to outmaneuver the North CEO, Sam Signar, and takes control.
Whoa, that's a serious power move, eating the acquirer.
It is. And it's the first sign that aggression was going to win out over conservatism in this new company. So Lay moved the headquarters to Houston. And he decides this new behemoth needs a new identity. The temporary name was just HNG North Inc.
Which is not exactly catchy.
No, not at all. So Kenneth Lay decides they need a brand. And this is my absolute favorite detail from the early days because it just foreshadows everything. He didn't just brainstorm a name over lunch. No. He hired Lippincott and Margulies, a high-end consulting firm. They spent over $100,000 in 1980s money on focus groups, design studies, the works.
Wow, that's probably $250,000 today, just to pick a name.
And after months of work, they came back with a winner. They proposed the name Enron.
Enron. It sounds futuristic. It sounds strong. Enter the future. The on switch. I can see it.
Kenneth Lay loved it. He thought it projected power. He announced it to the employees. They began printing stationery. They ordered the signs, enter on. And then just a few weeks before the stockholder vote in 1986, someone, and it was probably a low-level employee with a dictionary, raised their hand.
Because they finally looked it up.
They finally looked it up. Enteron is a medical term. It specifically refers to the alimentary canal, the digestive tract.
Oh no, the intestines.
The gut. They had spent a fortune to name their massive new energy conglomerate the intestine.
Invest in the intestine. We are flushing the competition down the... Wow.
Exactly. It's a total disaster. Lay was humiliated. They had to scramble, so they basically just chopped the middle letters out of the word. They removed the T and landed on Enron.
It's a funny story, but does it signal something deeper?
I think it does. I think it signals a tendency to prioritize the flash and the concept over the actual due diligence. They wanted a cool, modern name, but they didn't bother to check the dictionary. It's a small oversight, but it's so telling. It's style over substance right from day one.
And speaking of oversights, even in these early days, there were already financial cracks, weren't there? We tend to think of the fraud as a late 90s thing, but the sources point to an incident way back in 1987, the Valhalla incident.
This is absolutely crucial. Enron Oil, a subsidiary, was based in Valhalla, New York. They were supposed to be doing boring hedging, basically just protecting the company from price swings in oil. But the traders there, they started gambling. They were engaging in huge, unauthorized trading on the price of oil.
And I'm guessing they were making a lot of money at first?
Oh, they were bringing in huge profits. And because they were profitable, the executives in Houston didn't ask any questions. In fact, there is evidence that when auditors raised alarms about the complete lack of controls, Lay sent a message saying effectively, please keep making us millions.
So the precedent was set right there. If you make money, we don't care about the rules.
Precisely. But then, of course, the market turned. In 1987, the traders made a bad bet, a really bad bet. They tried to hide it. Enron Oil reported an $85 million loss, but the reality was much, much worse. The true loss was somewhere between $142 and $190 million.
That's enough to wipe out a company back then.
It almost did. And it was the first concealment. It established a culture where earnings were more important than ethics. But Enron was still, at its core, a pipeline company. To become the Enron we all know, they needed a new vision. They needed Jeff Skilling.
Enter the McKinsey consultant. Okay, section 2, the shift.
Jeff Skilling is the architect of the Enron legend. He wasn't an oil guy, he was a strategy guy, a true believer. In 1989, while he was still consulting for McKinsey, he pitched Enron a big idea. You have to understand, before this, natural gas was just boring. You dug it up, put it in a pipe, and signed a 20-year contract with a utility at a fixed price.
It was a physical delivery business, pure logistics, moving molecules from point A to point B.
Skilling looked at that and said, that's inefficient. He proposed the gas bank.
Okay, let's unpack the gas bank, because it sounds simple, but it fundamentally changed the entire industry.
Think of it like a normal bank, but for gas. A gas producer, a guy with a well, wants to sell gas, but he's afraid prices will drop next year. A utility, a power plant, wants to buy gas, but they're afraid prices will spike.
And Enron steps into the middle.
Enron steps into the middle. They say to the producer, we promise to buy your gas at a set price. And they say to the utility, we promise to sell you gas at a set price. Enron becomes the market maker. They absorb all the risk. And because they're sitting in the middle of all these deals, they can start trading. They can trade futures, swaps, options. They don't just move the gas physically anymore. They trade the financial obligation of the gas.
They turned a physical commodity into a financial product. I mean, Wall Street must have absolutely loved that.
Oh, they went crazy for it.
Yeah.
It unlocked massive liquidity. It made the market more efficient, but it required a completely different mindset. In 1988, they had what they called the come to Jesus meeting.
That sounds dramatic.
It was. It was the moment they decided to aggressively pursue unregulated markets. They weren't just a utility anymore. They were a trading firm. And Skilling was the guy leading the charge. He joined the company full-time in 1991 to run this gas bank division, and he brought this aggressive up-or-out culture with him.
And this leads us straight into section 3, the innovation trap. Because once Skilling took over, they decided this model worked for gas, so it must work for, well, everything.
Everything. Skilling had this philosophy he called asset light. He famously said in 2000 that business assets were an outdated means of a company's worth.
Asset light. That sounds great in a boardroom. It means getting rid of the heavy stuff, right? The pipes, the power plants, the trucks.
Exactly. He didn't want to own things that rust. He wanted to focus on intellectual assets,
Mhm.
the trading algorithms, the deals, the market positioning. He wanted Enron to be a platform, not a utility. And that led to a massive, massive trading spree. In 1999, they launched Enron Online,
Which was huge at the time. It was the first web-based transaction system for commodities.
and they traded everything. I mean, everything, not just oil and gas. They traded plastics, pulp, paper, steel. They even started trading weather risk.
Wait, weather risk. How in the world do you trade weather?
They're called weather derivatives. If you're a ski resort, you lose money if it doesn't snow, right? If you're a theme park, you lose money if it rains all summer. Enron would sell you a contract that paid out if the weather went against you.
Hmm.
It's actually a legitimate financial product now, but Enron was pioneering it at a massive scale.
But then we get to the stuff that wasn't so legitimate, or at least where the hype completely outpaced reality. We have to talk about broadband.
Oh, broadband. This was the absolute peak of the dot-com bubble. And Enron decided that bandwidth, the capacity to move data over the internet, was just another commodity like natural gas. They thought they could create a market and trade it.
They called it the Enron Intelligent Network.
They did. They bought up tons of inactive fiber optic cables that were already in the ground. And they built this massive state-of-the-art facility in Las Vegas. They claimed they could stream the entire Library of Congress anywhere in the world in minutes.
And they made that huge deal with Blockbuster in 2001. This is one of my favorite details in the stack. They announced a 20-year deal to stream movies on demand.
It sounds exactly like Netflix, years before Netflix streaming. But the technology just wasn't there. The last mile connections to people's homes were still dial-up for most people. The deal collapsed almost immediately. But here's the kicker. Enron executives hyped this broadband division to the moon. The stock price soared. Executives sold $924 million in stock while telling the public that broadband was going to be worth $40 billion.
And in reality,
The broadband division was bleeding money. It reported massive, massive losses. The Blockbuster deal never generated a single dollar of real profit. But because of their accounting, which we will get to, they booked imaginary profits anyway.
it wasn't just broadband, though. They tried to do the same thing with water.
Right, Azurix. This was Rebecca Mark's baby. She was a major executive, kind of a rival to Skilling, and she wanted to build a global water empire. They acquired Wessex Water in the UK.
Which was actually a good company, from what I understand.
It was a solid, profitable utility. But then they took Azurix public. They overpaid for assets. British regulators forced them to cut water rates. They took on massive debt. Azurix became a money pit, and Enron eventually had to suck all the cash out of it and sell it off for a huge loss.
And then there were the international projects. I feel like this is where the asset-light philosophy really crashed into the messy reality of the physical world.
It definitely did. Take Dabhol in India, a $2.9 billion disaster. They built a massive gas-fired power plant in a region that couldn't afford the electricity. The Indian government got into a dispute with them, stopped payments, construction halted. It was a political and financial nightmare that dragged on for years.
And my personal favorite of all the disasters, the Dominican Republic barge.
Oh, this is a vivid one. They had a power plant mounted on a barge off the coast of Puerto Plata. It was supposed to provide reliable power to the local grid. But the soot from the plant's smokestack was blowing directly onto a nearby luxury hotel.
So the guests are sitting by the pool eating dinner and just getting covered in soot.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Blackening their food. And because of the currents, garbage from a nearby slum kept clogging the water intake for the power plant's cooling system. They had to hire men in rowboats to paddle out and literally push the garbage away with sticks.
You can't trade your way out of that problem.
No, that is the reality of physical assets. They are messy. Enron didn't like messy. They liked clean, beautiful spreadsheets with big numbers on them.
Which brings us to the engine room of the whole disaster. Section 4. The mechanics of the fraud. How did they make these messy failures look like record-breaking profits?
Two main tools, really. Mark-to-market accounting and special purpose entities.
Okay, let's unpack mark-to-market because this sounds like legitimate accounting jargon, but they completely weaponized it.
It is legitimate, but for certain things like trading securities. If you own a stock and it goes up today, you can record that gain today, even if you haven't sold it yet. That makes sense for liquid assets.
But Enron wasn't using it for stocks. They were using it for these huge long-term deals.
Right. Let's go back to that Blockbuster deal. It was a 20-year agreement. Enron's accountants basically estimated how much profit they thought they would make over the next 20 years. Let's say they just pulled a number out of the air. $100 million in future profit. Under mark-to-market, they booked that $100 million as current income immediately.
Before they streamed a single movie, before they made a single dime.
That's it. They signed the contract, popped the champagne, and booked the entire projected profit of the deal.
So what happens when the deal falls apart 3 months later?
Well, technically, you're supposed to write it down as a loss, but Enron didn't like doing that. So they had massive profits on their books that were actually just imaginary future earnings that never materialized. It completely disconnected reported profit from actual cash. They were reporting billions in income, but had no cash coming in the door.
So they were cash poor but profit rich on paper. And to hide the debt and the lack of cash, they turned to these special purpose entities.
Enter Andrew Fastow, the CFO. He was the architect of the shell game.
The SPEs. These had crazy names like LJM, Chuco.
So Fastow created these off-balance sheet partnerships. The idea was simple but, well, nefarious. If Enron had a bad asset, say, that failing broadband business or a power plant in Brazil that was losing money, they would sell it to one of these SPEs.
So Enron gets the asset off their books.
Exactly. The debt associated with that asset disappears from Enron's balance sheet, and they get to record a sale, so they book even more fake revenue.
But who was running these SPEs? Who was on the other side of the deal buying this junk?
Well, that's the craziest part. Andy Fastow, he was the CFO of Enron, representing the seller, and he was also the manager of the LJM partnership, representing the buyer.
Wait, what? That is a massive, blatant conflict of interest.
It's the definition of conflict of interest. He was basically sitting on both sides of the table, negotiating with himself, and he was paying himself millions in management fees from these partnerships. He made over $30 million personally from these deals, but the only way these SPEs could afford to buy Enron's garbage was because they were backed by Enron stock.
Ah, there it is. So as long as Enron's stock price kept going up, the shell companies had value on paper, and they could keep buying the bad debt.
It was a self-fueling cycle. It was a Ponzi scheme built on the stock price. The moment the stock faltered, the whole house of cards was destined to collapse.
And while they were juggling these books, they were also wreaking havoc in the real world. Section 5, the California energy crisis. This is where the story gets really, really dark.
This is where the smartest guys in the room became the bad guys. In 2000, California deregulated its energy market. It was a deeply flawed system, and Enron exploited it ruthlessly.
We've all heard about the rolling blackouts. I mean, traffic lights going out, businesses shutting down, grandmothers stuck in elevators.
And Enron traders were actively causing this. They had these strategies with names like Death Star and Get Shorty and Ricochet. They would intentionally encourage power plants to shut down for maintenance to create artificial shortages.
And when supply goes down, the price goes up.
It skyrockets. They were selling power at 20 times the normal value. They were extracting billions and billions of dollars from California ratepayers.
And there is a specific piece of evidence that really just nails the culture here. The Grandma Millie tapes.
These are recordings of Enron traders talking during the crisis. And they just destroy any defense that they were just, providing liquidity to the market.
I have the transcript right here. One trader asks, "They're taking all the money back you guys stole from those poor grandmothers in California."
And the other trader laughs and says, "Yeah, Grandma Millie, man." But she's the one who couldn't figure out how to vote on the butterfly ballot. They were mocking the elderly voters in Florida while ripping them off in California.
And then the line that really sticks with you. Jammed right up her ass for $250 a megawatt hour.
It's just chilling. It shows a complete and total lack of empathy. To them, it was just a video game. They were high-fiving in Houston over creating blackouts on the West Coast.
So you have the accounting fraud, the moral bankruptcy, and this financial house of cards. Eventually, gravity has to kick in. Section 6, the unraveling.
The peak was August of 2000. The stock hits $90 a share. Everyone loves Enron. But the skeptics were starting to circle.
Right. Bethany McLean, she wrote a piece for Fortune magazine titled, "Is Enron Overpriced?"
Such a simple question. She just asked, how exactly does this company make money? She looked at their financial documents and she couldn't figure it out. And the reason was because it was unfigure-outable. It was nonsense.
And then there was Daniel Scotto, a utility analyst. He suspended his ratings on energy companies in California, warning that they weren't going to get paid. He told investors to sell Enron.
And Enron did not handle the criticism well. There's a famous conference call in April of 2001. Richard Grubman, a skeptical analyst, asked Jeff Skilling for a balance sheet. Skilling kind of dodged, said they couldn't produce one just yet. Grubman pushed back, saying, You're the only company that can't release a balance sheet along with your earnings.
And Skilling's response to that?
He said, well, thank you very much. We appreciate that, asshole.
On a live conference call with Wall Street.
It was the emperor has no clothes moment. CEOs of solid companies don't call analysts names like that. It showed the stress. It showed the sheer arrogance.
And internally, people knew, right? Sharon Watkins,
The VP of Corporate Development. She wrote an anonymous memo to Kenneth Lay in August 2001. She warned him in black and white that the company would implode in a wave of accounting scandals. She laid it all out. The SPEs, the inflated profits, she knew.
But Lay didn't fix it. He tried to cover it up. He was selling his own stock while telling employees to buy more.
And that's the ultimate betrayal. The stock started free-falling. They tried to arrange a merger with Danegy, a rival, to save themselves, but Danegy took one look at the real books and ran for the hills.
And then on December 2001, Enron filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. At the time, it was the largest bankruptcy in U.S. history.
$63 billion in assets. Just gone. Thousands of employees lost their jobs. But worse, so much worse, they lost their pensions. Enron had encouraged employees to put their entire 401ks into Enron stock. When the stock went from $90 to pennies, their retirement savings just evaporated.
Unbelievable. Let's talk about consequences. Section 7, the aftermath.
The legal fallout was massive. Arthur Andersen, the accounting firm that signed off on all this fraud, was convicted of obstruction of justice for shredding tons of documents.
Tons of documents.
Literally, they were running industrial shredders 24/7. And even though the conviction was later overturned by the Supreme Court on a technicality, the firm was destroyed. The damage was done. The Big Five accounting firms became the Big Four.
And the executives.
Kenneth Lay was convicted of conspiracy and fraud. He died of a heart attack before he could be sentenced, so technically his conviction was vacated, but, history judges him.
And Skilling.
Jeff Skilling got 24 years. He ended up serving about 12. He was the face of the arrogance, really.
And Andy Fastow, the architect of the whole shell game.
He cut a plea deal. He testified against the others. He got 6 years.
And out of all this mess, we got the Sarbanes-Oxley Act.
Yes. SOX, a huge piece of legislation. It made executives personally liable for the accuracy of financial statements. It tried to put some guardrails up to prevent this from ever happening again.
And what about the actual assets, the stuff Enron owned?
This is the irony. The boring stuff, the pipelines, was sold off and is still operating profitably today. It's valuable, real infrastructure.
And the future, the broadband stuff.
The famous Las Vegas broadband facility. It was sold for pennies on the dollar. It was bought by a guy named Rob Roy, who started a company called Switch.
Switch, the massive data center company.
The very same. That facility is now part of what they call the SuperNAP, one of the most advanced data centers in the world. So the idea was right. The internet did need massive bandwidth. Enron was just too early, too fraudulent, and way too focused on the stock price to actually build the business.
That is a fascinating nugget. The vision was actually correct. The execution was criminal.
Precisely. It's the story of the whole company in a nutshell.
Now, we have to jump to the present day. Because if you thought the Enron story ended in 2001, you haven't checked X lately, Section 8, the satirical reboot.
This is one of the strangest codas to a corporate history I have ever seen. On December 2, 2024, the @Enron account on X posted, "We're back. Can we talk?"
And the internet just lost its mind.
It did. People had no idea if it was real, if it was a scam, or what was going on. It turns out the rights to the Enron brand had been bought at an auction for $275.
$275 to own the Enron name? That's a steal.
And the people who bought it are linked to the Birds Aren't Real movement.
For listeners who don't know, Birds Aren't Real is a Gen Z satirical conspiracy theory claiming that all birds are actually government drones. It's a huge piece of performance art.
Exactly. So these performance artists resurrected Enron. They announced a new CEO, a guy named Connor Gatos. They staged a power summit on January 6th, 2025.
And they announced new products, the Enron Egg.
The Enron Egg, a micronuclear reactor that is capable of powering a suburban home for 10 years.
Using 20% enriched uranium, no less.
Obviously, this is not a real product. It's biting satire on the tech industry's tendency to overpromise. It's skewering the clean energy hype cycles we see all the time.
And they launched a crypto token, of course. Had to. Enron on the Solana blockchain.
Which is just perfect. Enron was the original financialization of everything company. Crypto is the ultimate financialization of, well, nothing. The token's market cap spiked to $700 million and then crashed 76% in 24 hours.
It's like they reenacted the Enron stock chart in speedrun mode.
It's performance art reflecting reality in the most direct way possible. They even had the CEO get pied in the face, which mirrors a real incident where Jeff Skilling was pied in San Francisco after the collapse.
So why do you think this brand still resonates? Why are kids who weren't even born when Enron collapsed making memes about it?
Because Enron has become the archetype. It is the shorthand for corporate villain. It's the symbol of the suit-wearing sociopath who will destroy the world for a bonus. In an era of skepticism about capitalism, about tech bros, about AI hype, Enron is the patron saint of the grift.
It really is. It's the ultimate cautionary tale that it seems nobody seems to actually learn from.
And that leads us to the big question, doesn't it?
So what does this all mean? We've walked through the history, the fraud, the blackouts, and now the memes.
The takeaway for me is all about the danger of intangibles. Enron was obsessed with being asset-light. They wanted to trade intellectual capital. They didn't want to get their hands dirty with actual pipes and actual plants.
And today,
Look around. We have crypto companies valued at billions of dollars with no actual product. We have AI companies trading on revenue multiples that assume they will own the entire future of the economy. We have a market that is completely obsessed with narrative over cash flow.
we are doing it again, aren't we?
We might be. I mean, Enron wasn't an anomaly. It was a preview. They were trying to monetize the idea of value rather than value itself. And when you look at how much of our modern economy is based on intangible assets, on brand value, and on speculative tech, you really have to wonder.
Have we actually learned the lesson?
Or did Enron just do it 20 years too early?
That is a terrifying thought to leave us with. Next time you see a company hyped as changing the world, but you can't quite figure out how they make money,
Yeah.
maybe go look for the pipelines. Look for the boring stuff.
And maybe check if they named their company after an intestine.
Always check the dictionary. That's it for this deep dive into Enron. Thanks for listening, and stay curious.
Let's stay skeptical.